This is the real, unfiltered testimony from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom had already witnessed shocking video footage, scandalous witness accounts, and whispers that shook the entire music industry. But no one, absolutely no one, was ready for what came next. A surprise witness stepped forward, a man who had kept quiet for years, a man whose clothing, a plain black cassock and a worn crucifix, marked him as a priest, someone bound by vows of confidentiality, penance, and spiritual duty. But this wasn't just any priest. He was Diddy's former spiritual advisor, and he was here to speak under oath. What he said made the entire courtroom gasp. He told me he'd already been forgiven because he paid for it, the priest testified. When asked what that meant, his answer sent chills through the room. This wasn't just about alleged crimes. This was about a man who believed he could buy redemption. This is the story of the priest who broke his silence and what he exposed about Sean Diddy Combs. Confusion swept the room when the prosecution announced a new witness. Even the judge looked surprised. No name was given. The bailiff simply said, "Please rise," for Father M. A silver-haired man in a black cassock walked in. His face was unreadable. Around his neck, an old crucifix. Whispers filled the courtroom. Reporters scribbled frantically. Jurors looked at each other. Diddy, for the first time that day, leaned over to whisper to his lawyer. His eyes widened at the response and snapped toward the priest now standing before the judge. This witness was cleared through emergency review due to the nature of his privileged insight, the prosecutor explained. We ask the court to hear testimony about his years as the defendant's spiritual advisor. The defense erupted, arguing that a priest can't testify against someone he counseled. But the prosecution calmly clarified, "Your Honor, this wasn't a confession. These were private spiritual talks, not protected by church rules. And Father M has come forward voluntarily." The judge gave the green light. "Proceed," she said. Father M took the stand and introduced himself as someone who'd spent over 20 years counseling public figures, celebrities, politicians, people grappling with guilt, trauma, and lives full of contradiction. He said he was referred to Diddy in 2012 by another celebrity, whom he refused to name. His role? Not to absolve, but to guide. "I was called to help a man torn between two lives," he said. "But instead, I found someone who believed forgiveness could be bought. He didn't want peace. He wanted protection." What followed was one of the darkest and most surreal chapters of the trial. Father M described the first time he visited Diddy's estate, not to pray in a chapel, but to meet in what he called a fake confessional built into the back of a luxury recording studio in Los Angeles. It was 2013. The priest recalled passing layers of security and black SUVs before being led into a room more fitting for a nightclub than a sacred space, velvet curtains, incense, and Gregorian chants playing from a Bluetooth speaker. He called me Padre of the Stars, like I was just another piece of his brand, Father M testified. He built his own church, but it didn't worship grace, it worshipped power. Over several sessions, the priest said, Diddy began revealing deeply disturbing things. Not just remorse, but pride. Pride in getting away with things other people wouldn't dare even try. He once told me, "People talk about demons like they're a metaphor. I invited mine in, and made them work for me." The priest said he tried to steer the conversations toward accountability, but Diddy dismissed him. "Why confess?" he said. "If I've already been cleansed?" The turning point came during their third meeting. Diddy, visibly agitated, spoke of a woman who had threatened to go public. "She thinks anyone will believe her over me? I feed entire cities," he scoffed. Then he looked Father M straight in the eyes and said, "Besides, I already paid for my sins. You people cash the check." At that moment in the courtroom, Even the stenographer stopped typing. The silence was deafening. "This is not a man searching for God," the priest warned. "This is a man using God as a weapon." As Father M continued, the courtroom grew heavier. This wasn't just a case about what Diddy did. It was about how he thought, about his entire belief system. The priest explained how Diddy had created his own twisted version of morality, a sort of karmic accounting, where every dark act could be wiped clean by a donation, a scholarship, or a photo op with kids. In Harlem. He thought morality was math, the priest said. He'd say things like, "I gave $1 million to Harlem schools last year. That's got to count for something." But that wasn't redemption. That was branding, and the courtroom, along with the world, was beginning to see just how deep the darkness went. "That donation should clear at least 3 sins," Diddy once joked. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence as Father M continued. He told the jury that Diddy's generosity wasn't spiritual, it was strategic. "He used to show me the donation checks before mailing them," the priest testified. He'd say, "This'll keep the demons quiet for another year." But one conversation haunted him more than the others. Diddy once asked if giving money to orphanages overseas could balance out some missteps he made at home. "When suck?" The priest pressed him on what he meant by missteps. Diddy smirked and said, "Let's just say some people didn't enjoy the party as much as I hoped." Father M said he tried, time and again, to guide Diddy toward reflection, toward real repentance, but it never landed. Diddy didn't want penance. He wanted proof of payment. He treated salvation like a monthly subscription, not a spiritual sacrifice. "No amount of charity can erase deliberate harm," the priest once told him. Diddy's reply? "I've done more for this world than any choir boy," he snapped. "I made people rich. I put people on. Don't lecture me from a book you didn't even write." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. "That was when I realized," Father M said softly. He didn't see God as someone to answer to. He saw him as a brand to hijack. The judge sat stone-faced. The jury looked visibly shaken, because this wasn't just about what Diddy had done. It was about how he thought. The idea that someone could do real harm and still feel morally bulletproof because they'd written enough checks. That hit. Harder than the crimes themselves, and the priest wasn't finished. He took a sip of water, adjusted his glasses, and continued. "What disturbed me most wasn't the acts he described. It was how he described them," he said. He didn't see sin as a failing. He saw it as a tool. And forgiveness? That wasn't something he earned. He believed it was something he could own. Then came the most chilling moment yet. Father M recalled a session from 2015, right after a high-profile lawsuit had mysteriously vanished from the headlines. Diddy was anxious that day, pacing back and forth, flipping a gold chain between his fingers like a rosary. Then he stopped, looked the priest in the eyes. "Even if they catch me, even if they come for me tomorrow, I'm clean," he said. The priest asked him what he meant. Diddy smirked. "I own my salvation." The courtroom froze. "I own my salvation." He didn't mean it as a metaphor. According to the priest, Diddy literally believed that his wealth had bought him divine immunity, that God, like everyone else, had been paid off. "I've donated more than most priests will ever see in 10 lifetimes, Diddy reportedly said. "That makes me forgiven, whether they like it or not." Father M said he tried to explain that grace doesn't work like that. That's when Diddy exploded. "You want me to kneel? I don't kneel to anyone," he shouted. "I'm the reason. Half your pastors drive Bentleys." Father M said that moment shook his faith, deeply. "For days I questioned whether I'd become part of the problem," he confessed. "Just by listening, by staying quiet, had I helped someone weaponize God?" And then came the most surreal detail of all. Father M said that in the same room where they had these so-called spiritual sessions, Diddy kept a painting, a twisted crucifixion. But it wasn't Jesus on the cross. It was a silhouette of a man in a business suit, hung from music notes. "Art is interpretation," Diddy told him, "and I'm the one doing the remix." That was the moment the courtroom lost it. One juror audibly gasped and covered their mouth. Courtroom sketch artists froze mid-stroke. Reporters scrambled to whisper into their mics. And for the first time since the trial began, the judge lost composure, slamming her gavel. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom!" Diddy, who had kept calm throughout earlier testimony, was now shaking his head. His lawyer leaned over, clearly whispering for him to stay quiet. But Diddy couldn't sit still. He clasped his hands together in mock prayer. It didn't feel spiritual. It felt performative. Some thought he might cry, but the tears never came. That's when the prosecution struck hard. This testimony shows not just what the defendant did, but how he thinks. It reveals a man who doesn't feel remorse, because he believes his money erased the need for it. The defense jumped up, furious. "Your Honor, this is character assassination dressed up as theology. The church has no place in this courtroom." But the judge wasn't buying it. "He brought the church into this, Mr. Walker," she said coldly. The moment he used religion to excuse his actions. The letter didn't just signal forethought. It outlined a strategy. Inside were pages detailing how to cry on camera, which charities to fund, which pastors would publicly vouch for him. There was even a list of pre-approved phrases for future interviews. "My mistakes don't define me. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. God's not done with me yet." Each one rehearsed. Each one, according to Father M, scripted repentance, part of the brand. But what shook the courtroom wasn't just the strategy, it was the implication. Diddy hadn't just built an image of power, he had engineered his own downfall, anticipating, repackaging it, and planning to rise again as a rebranded prodigal son. The prosecutor leaned in. "Father, in your opinion, did the defendant ever believe in true forgiveness?" The priest didn't hesitate. "No," he said. "He believed in optics." At the defense table, Diddy didn't flinch. This wasn't just a testimony. It was a spiritual autopsy. But it wasn't over, because the final part of Father M's testimony was still to come, the moment he severed ties, and why he now feared. Not for his life, but for Diddy's soul. It was 2020. The world was on lockdown. Churches were closed. Red carpets were canceled. For the first time in decades, Diddy was alone. He called Father M late one night, asking him to break quarantine. The priest hesitated, then agreed. He thought maybe this was it. That maybe, stripped of the spotlight, Diddy had finally been forced to confront his guilt. He was wrong. He was sitting in a dim room. No music, just silence, Father M recalled. There were candles everywhere. I thought it was a vigil, but it was a celebration. Diddy had just signed a massive new deal, something major, global. He poured us both a drink. I declined. He raised his glass and said, "To sins paid in full." Father M broke down on the stand. I begged him that night. I told him, forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's not a marketing plan. There's still time. But Diddy just stared at him and said, "You were never meant to save me. You were meant to bless me. That's it." That was the last time they spoke. He didn't want salvation, the priest said, voice cracking. He wanted immunity. The room fell completely silent. A juror wiped away a tear. A reporter was overheard whispering, "This isn't a trial anymore. It's an exorcism." The judge called for a recess, but Father M wasn't finished. He turned to the jury and said his final words. He didn't confess to be saved. He confessed to control the narrative. Now it's your turn to decide what that narrative becomes. Just as the courtroom believed it had heard the worst, a new revelation erupted, and it didn't come from the priest. It came from the outside. While the trial was still underway, an anonymous source leaked the full contents of the envelope Diddy had handed Father M years earlier. It was posted on an encrypted forum used by investigative journalists. Within hours, it had gone viral. It wasn't just a letter, it was a blueprint for survival. The documents were divided into sections: pre-crisis media strategy, church partners for image rehab, and most chillingly, leverage under leverage was a list of names: pastors, producers, politicians, each followed by vague but ominous phrases. He took the jet, remind him. Photos from Bahamas trip, 2007. Donation funnel through Daughters.org. And others that read like code: Spaghetti Night, West Wing, after 3 a.m. Havana files, not printable. Reporters scrambled to verify the leak. Experts confirmed the handwriting matched Diddy's. A forensic linguist hired by a major network concluded this was written by someone deeply fluent in damage control at the highest level. But what disturbed the public most wasn't a name or a file. It was a single paragraph, tucked at the bottom of the final page. If this gets out, I've already built the ark. Let the flood come. I've chosen who's on board. Theories. Exploded. What was the ark? A private island? A server full of blackmail? A metaphor for protected status? No one knew for sure. But the message was clear. He hadn't just expected to be exposed. He believed he could outlast it. In court, prosecutors moved swiftly to submit the leaked file into evidence. Diddy's legal team panicked, demanding it be excluded due to tainted chain of custody. But the damage was done. The media played excerpts on loop. Social media erupted. Diddy arc. Let the flood come. Paid in full jurors looked shell-shocked. This wasn't a man pleading for innocence. This was a man who had planned how to survive guilt, and when Father M was shown the full document for the first time, right there in court, he closed his eyes. He never came to confess, he said. He came to rehearse. And in that moment, it became clear. This trial wasn't about whether Diddy was guilty. It was about whether anyone could stop him. The judge ruled it was relevant, and so the priest continued, while security quietly repositioned themselves closer to Diddy. The atmosphere had changed. This wasn't just a trial about alleged crimes anymore. It was a trial about belief, about how power, ego, and money can twist morality into something unrecognizable. Outside the courthouse, headlines exploded. I own my salvation. Diddy's bizarre claims stun court. Priest testifies. Diddy thinks he's already forgiven. Gospel of greed, did he buy redemption? Inside, Father M remained composed, but emotionally worn. You don't understand, he said, voice heavy. To him, forgiveness wasn't something received. It was something possessed. That's when he introduced the idea of what he called the performance of piety. According to Father M, between 2010 and 2020, Diddy gave nearly $25 million to over 20 churches and religious charities. But these weren't quiet, anonymous offerings. They came with conditions: public recognition, speaking opportunities, and carefully curated moments that looked like worship but felt like PR. He used churches as stages, Father M said. He'd walk in wearing designer sunglasses and a diamond cross, hand out envelopes of cash to the choir, and talk about how God had blessed his hustle. People cheered, but it wasn't faith, it was branding. Then came a particularly disturbing example. In 2017, Diddy gave $2 million to a megachurch. Days later, He allegedly requested that a sermon about judgment and sin be removed from their YouTube channel. The church complied. He didn't want to hear about sin, the priest said. He wanted to erase it. Even more chilling was a quote from a recorded conversation between Diddy and another religious figure, name withheld. "The world loves a sinner turned saint. I just skipped the middle part." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Then a prosecutor asked the big question, "Father, did he ever confess to anything specific? Something criminal?" Father M paused. He made allusions, disturbing ones. He spoke of people who disappeared or who had to learn hard lessons, but always in metaphor. He knew just how far to go without crossing a line. Still, the implication was, there. Diddy believed he was morally untouchable, his spiritual ledger stacked with purchased redemption credits. Even the courtroom staff looked shaken. One bailiff was overheard muttering, "I've seen a lot of trials. I've never seen anything like this." And then came the most damning moment yet. Father M described a meeting in late 2018. Rumors were starting to swirl. Stories, settlements, celebrities cutting ties. The public didn't know. But Diddy knew. He called the priest for what he described as a spiritual intervention. Father M came expecting regret, maybe even panic. Instead, he found Diddy chain-smoking, pacing through his estate with tabloid clippings taped to the eye. Walls, laughing bitterly. "Padre," he said, "I'm about to be tested, not by God, by them." When Father M asked what he meant, Diddy threw the clippings into the air and said, "They think the church is going to stop me. The church can't touch me." Father M sat still on the stand. "That's when I realized," he said quietly. He didn't see God as a moral compass. He saw him as a competitor. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence, the only sound being the rapid tapping of a court reporter's keyboard. "What exactly did he mean?" the prosecutor asked. He believed that as long as he kept writing checks, looking holy, and owning the narrative, no church, no priest, no pope could ever challenge him. Then came another quote, one the priest never forgot. "The Pope couldn't preach to me with a straight face," Diddy allegedly said. "I pay more in 1 week than his whole city does in a year." He didn't just compare himself to religion, he saw himself as bigger than it. Fame was his faith, Father M said, and he believed he was the god of it. The priest admitted, he almost walked away after that. "I wanted to run," he said. "But I stayed. I thought maybe, just maybe, he could still be saved." That hope ended moments later. Diddy reached into a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to Father M. "Just in case they try to drag me," he said. "Open this when it's over. You'll see. I already won." That envelope, Father M confirmed, was turned over to authorities earlier this year. Its contents remain sealed, but the court allowed the cover letter to be read aloud. Dated December 24, 2018, and handwritten in Diddy's signature cursive, it read, "To whoever's reading this after the fall, just know I was 10 moves ahead. This is the playbook. You only catch me if I let you. But by the time this opens, I've already been forgiven. That's what matters. The rest? Just noise." Father M's hands trembled as he finished. He wrote that before any charges, before any lawsuits, before the public even knew. He had already made peace with it on his own terms. Because in Diddy's mind, redemption wasn't divine. It was strategized, prepaid, privatized, and entirely under his control.